Okay, welcome everyone. It looks like we had some tech issues and we don't have enough people in the digital industry. So welcome again to the BTS talks, one more Friday. Today we're gonna be talking, first of all, I'm Eloi, I'm a product manager and been working in Cabify for the last years, and I'm also the coordinator of the digital product management master here in BTS. And today we're going to be talking around the tech profiles or tech backgrounds that we have in our industry, especially in product management roles, and the differences of skills or backgrounds that we have between or among our profiles, right? So basically, today we're going to be talking about, or we're going to be talking with Tania and Eva. So welcome, two of you, and thank you for joining us.
Hi all.
Thanks, Eloi.
Tania and Eva don't have a background on the tech side. They started their careers in other type of studies, and today we're going to be talking about the problems and challenges that they faced on their early days and how they're managing to move to the digital ecosystem nowadays. Eva Risk is working as a senior product manager in Cabify in the corporate group, and Tania is working in the group as a group PM in the rider audience. So the three of us basically working in Cabify, and well, it's going to be a little bit weird to have like a public interview with all of you, but we try to do our best. Thanks all for joining today, and let's start. If you want to start, Eva, I would like to understand where you start your career, what are your studies, and how you start with it.
Sure. Well, hi everyone. And thanks, Eloi. So my background is very different from anything related to the tech world. I studied art history, so I'm an art historian originally, and I studied here in Spain, in Madrid. And then after that, I worked for many years in the art world in different countries. I was specializing in Latin American contemporary art, and I worked there in the US and in Colombia and in Spain.
And what about you, Tania?
Hi all. Thank you, Eloi. I studied translation and interpreting some years ago, everything related with English, French. Once I started with Russian, but didn't work, also with some Italian. So kind of similar because they are also languages, but not the one that engineering use. So it didn't help me a lot when I started in this world.
So I guess both of you, at some point, you decide you need a change on your career. How was this decision and why? If you ever want to start.
Sure. So yeah, so I've told you before, in my case was a mix of things, a mix of a personal need that I had to change careers. I was working at the time at an art gallery in New York, but I was living in Spain, so I was going back and forth from one place to the other, and kind of needed to have a more stable, in terms of geographically stable, job. And then I also was very, very curious to kind of like keep learning and keep being challenged, and that's something that doesn't necessarily always happen in more traditional businesses. So I really needed a big change, and I started considering changes in my career path. And then kind of like serendipity also happened there. And I had a friend who told me about a friend who had just started a startup, and they had just closed their first seed round. So they had the funding to start growing a little bit more. And he was in desperate need to have people join and kind of help him out, build the rest of the experience and the team and the company. And so I agreed to have a coffee with him, and he told me about the product. And it immediately hooked me. I really connected with their idea. It was an app for learning languages for very young children. I don't know if some of you might know, it's Lingo Kids. It's what it's called. Today it's a little bit bigger than it was when I joined. And they needed help. So I agreed to start part-time, because that allowed me, between the mix of time zone differences and such, to kind of keep my job in the art gallery and at the same time start exploring this new area with him. And after 3 months, I quit my job at the art gallery. I was hooked. I loved the idea of the digital product world, the tech world, and I started working full-time with them.
Did you had, and just to deep dive a little bit on that, did you had any other experience or knowledge from what product was?
Not at all. This was literally like a total leap of faith. I had no idea if I was going to like it. I had no idea if I could actually add any value, which was the reason why we decided to do this kind of like trial period to kind of like understand if it was something that would work for both sides. And at the beginning, if any of you have joined a startup at a very early stage, you will know that everyone does everything at the same time running around. So, I mean, my responsibilities would go from helping out with recruiting to writing press releases to helping set up marketing campaigns, you know, like the content of the campaigns and the emails that would be sent, or kind of pairing with the growth person that we had to start elaborating experiments and analyzing and stuff. So it was literally learning about every single area of a company that you could possibly learn from, and supporting in any way that was possible. So it wasn't even a specific role that I was offered. It was more like help, you know, it was more a cry for help than anything else. That was the beginning. Yeah.
Cool. That's an interesting one. And how was your process, Tania? Why did you decide to move to, or how it was?
It was a bit different and have many things in common. So what Eva was saying just before, because I was studying my last year in the degree and I moved to Madrid. So someone near my family was working or starting like Cabify when it was a familiar company, let's say. So he told me we need people just to help, as I was mentioning. We have a lot of things to do, and if you want to join us with an internship, at the same time you are finishing your studies, could be a good challenge for you to start going inside the job. So I accepted, and it was an internship in the customer department, the customer support department. And there we did almost everything, but not related with technology or digital. It was in Cabify, so you know that. So it was more in the business side. What we did in that department was talking a lot with users, both clients because they want to hire a service, a mobility service, also with drivers in order to help them understand the application, the issues they have, give support. Also, we did some, the ratings we have today in order to understand if riders have a good time while traveling with us. We did it manually, like phoning the rider, hey, how was the trip? Did you enjoy? Did the driver work as expected? So I also did some billing things. So it was very different. And I was there for a year and a half, more or less. And then a colleague, I mean, the head of product by that time, tell me, since you know our customers and also our drivers and the internal tools we use, how do you think about moving to the product side, to the tech side, in order to help us with manual QA? In the end, I knew the needs and the problems both riders and drivers had. So it was a good opportunity for someone without technical background to join this department. So I started to test both applications, from the driver one, the rider one, also the website, almost everything, because everyone did everything. That was the beginning in the tech side. And after a couple of years doing this job, they told me if I wanted to start as PM. So I accepted the challenge as an associate. You know, just I needed to understand what were the needs for this role, because I didn't know anything about that.
You explained it like super easy, that you start testing the app, but I guess this brings like many challenges for you at some point. Like okay, you start testing the app. How? You need a minimum knowledge of some tools at least to start doing that.
At the very beginning, I tested that just with the mentality of a driver. You know, anything related with technology, I just, or a rider, just moving things in the application, tapping different places, seeing how it behaves, and giving feedback to the engineers. So this doesn't work as a driver expected. So I brought to them this vision of the user. And while doing this relation among us, I started to learn, because they explain the things with very technical words that I didn't understand at all. So I just needed, I don't know, Pedro, please sit down with me and explain me what an APA is, please, because I didn't know anything about that. And that's why, that's how I started knowing about all these things.
Isn't it intimidating, at least the first time? Like you say, okay, this is the software developer. He knows a lot about the technical services that we have, and he needs to explain me like the basics to have a regular conversation.
Yes, it was. But at the same time, I brought to them a different point of view that they also appreciate. So it was more like, I give you something and then you give me something to me that make us better as workers. So people were really, really open to talk to me and to explain things. Even we have some sessions per week to understand the basics of technology, how things were built, and how the monolith that we had by that time works. So it was really easy to start because of the people were really open to explain that to me and my colleagues that did the same transition.
Did you have a similar experience, Eva, when you start like you mentioned like helping in everything in Lingo Kids? You have the same feeling with your colleagues there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my case, I mean, we were a lot smaller, but in my case, it was actually very similar to Tania's experience, because I also, the first specific role that I had at the company after doing like all those many things was to set up the customer success area. So we had nothing there. We had no customer success strategy area or anything of the sorts. And so the first responsibility that I had there was to create the area, the strategy, the operations, hire the team, etc. And that gave me kind of like an open window to how users were interacting with the product and what problems they were experiencing and such, and force conversations with the engineering team, with the design team, with, there was no product manager, by the way, there was like no product specific team per se. So it was kind of, everyone designing the product as a team. And that really started very specifically piquing my interest on product management, because it connected me to the product and to the different parts of the product from a business perspective, from a design perspective, and from a technical perspective. That kind of like really resonated with what I wanted to do.
So I guess at some point your role or your scope was more defined. You say, okay, I'm going to go on the product management direction. I'm going to be leading this part of the product in Lingo Kids.
So in my case, starting from the customer success part, that's when I started showing more interest in the product per se. And we had the opportunity of creating a spin-off. Our core product was an app, right? It was an app to teach languages. And there was a spin-off project to have online classes and such. And so the CEO of the company, the founder that I had initially started speaking to, offered me the chance to take on that challenge, explore the spin-off by yourself. If this is something that you want to do, let's use this, which is a great idea, right? Like taking someone that has no previous background in product management. But it was actually really cool, because it was incredibly challenging, and it meant, millions of extra hours, a lot of like sleepless nights and stuff like that, and a lot of effort. But at the same time, it forces you to learn. And in my case, it was a very similar thing to Tania's, in the sense that I was lucky enough to be surrounded by a group of people that were super willing to teach you and to share their knowledge and their area of expertise with you. So whenever, you know, at the first, especially for spin-off, we were just kind of like validating the idea. So there was a lot of manual work, a lot of, you know, no code tools involved and stuff like that. But it did require to at least an understanding on like how we would iterate and stuff like that. That meant a lot of conversations with other teams, and yeah, that was huge. So that's when I started focusing more on product management with that project.
I see many points in common also from my experience, and I see, or it looks like super important that from this type of companies, this type of startups that are willing to change at least their industries or build a product to accomplish their goals. How important is to set this culture or this ecosystem where people shares, helps others, and starts growing even many people from scratch. I mean, we have many examples also in Cabify from people that comes from different backgrounds and profiles to then that they grow in product roles or even in other type of roles. They start as a front ender or as a designer or something like this. And I see that as a differentiation from more traditional businesses, probably. I don't know, what do you think about it? Do you think it's important for a startup on the digital ecosystem to have this?
Sure.
Tania,
sure.
you want to start?
Yeah, it's, I mean, if for small companies or companies that are growing, I think it's essential to have different backgrounds and different people willing to grow and learn different things, because you cannot be so specialized if you don't even know if the business is going to be good or not, right, for the people. So just sharing and have this attitude of shared knowledge with everyone, I think it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, to me, I think that it's kind of like something that is like native to the tech world, is that there's no bachelor's degree on product management. Like there's no university that has, you know, you're like all of a sudden like a bachelor of product management or you know, UX or any of these disciplines that are very related to the digital world. So it's very, I mean, it's just not possible to see people that do not come from different backgrounds. It's kind of like a given that your background is going to be very different, unless you have studied computer engineering, that is more traditional in the sense of studies, right? But it is true that now there's starting to be a lot of schools and institutions, such as this one, right, that start offering like courses and like more formal training for these disciplines. But this is something relatively new. So in a native way, again, I think it's just super common to the tech world experience.
Totally agree. Yeah, when I started my career also in product roles, I didn't know anything about it, and product roles didn't exist 10 years ago. So it's important also to adapt, and people or companies that want to survive will need to do that, definitely. Okay, so Tania, you mentioned that you already started in Cabify. I guess your daily job changed a lot from the beginning until your current situation. How we do that and how it is nowadays?
Yeah, it was very, very different from the beginning. As I mentioned, I was with a telephone almost every day, talking with different users. Then I was also with a telephone, but doing the test, which is very, very different with other people. And now I'm in the product management role. I'm every day talking to people, to internal people, trying to align everyone to decide and to do the things that will impact our customers, also the business, and aligning every time with designers, with data analytics, with research, with engineering. So as Eva also mentioned before, it's also a great opportunity to learn from every discipline, because in the end, as PM, you are always talking with different people who has different backgrounds and different strengths. So if you are willing to learn and willing to improve yourself, these positions, it's great, because every day is a different thing and every day is different people. So it's real nice, yeah.
And do you like in these daily job tasks a knowledge on the tech side? I mean, on the conversations that you have regularly with engineers or designers, do you still like that you are not in the same level from technical perspective?
I started in products 4 years ago, and when I started, I did some courses related with programming. Also in Cabify, people did some internal talks and exercise, so everyone who is not so good or who didn't know anything about the engineering part could learn. So apart of that, I joined almost every engineer channel we have in the Slack tool, that is the tool that we use for communication. So I started to read almost everything related with engineering teams, the merge requests, almost everything. So yes, I started to understand. And when I didn't understand something, I asked them, okay, tell me what does it mean, or in internet, whatever, no? So for me right now, it's much easier. Of course, there are things that I don't know and I need more explanation, but if you are a curious person and you have nice colleagues as we have, it's easier. I mean, it doesn't block your job.
And what about you, Eva? You spent some years in Lingo Kids, then you moved to Cabify. I think it was more or less two years ago. How was this transition? It was super different, one company to the other one, and
yeah, relatively. Yeah. So in Lingo Kids, from the moment of not having any product team at all, right? Before I left, there was a big growth there. We eventually hired a VP of product, and then my position as a PM became like permanent. So it was like a couple of years there where I started establishing myself more there and getting more formal training and kind of like, become like an actual PM. And then from there to the moment when I jumped to Cabify, it was basically going from a company where like the team was pretty young in terms of experience or length of the existence of a product team, to a company like Cabify where like the product team was pretty established. It really impressed me how there were like so many product managers, and like each product team was very well formed in terms of like the different people that composed it. So it was easier in a way in terms of the bigger amount of resources that you had. And it was also at the same time kind of challenging because, that meant also more processes. And, I came from a more guerrilla approach of doing things. And here there was more processes and a lot more stakeholders. I think that was the biggest change for me, that the amount of stakeholders that you had, that I had in Lingo Kids had nothing to do with the amount of stakeholders that exist here in Cabify. So as a PM, that's one of the things that you have to juggle with a lot, is kind of not only like understanding the technology you're using and understanding the design you're using and stuff, but also being able to translate that into different areas of the business and in a language that is understood by everyone. So that is why it's especially important to understand the technology yourself, because in the end, you cannot explain something that you don't understand. So the effort there to kind of, get to really get at least the basis of it is definitely bigger.
And does the imposter syndrome appear sometime?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's something that every single person who has done a career change has struggled with. And I think it's impossible to kind of like not experience it. But I think that it's something that we all go through, but we have to overcome the same way as we have to overcome the lack of knowledge in some areas. And so for that, you get training and you learn from others and you learn from other people and you look at how other people do things. For the imposter syndrome, it's modified within yourself. But again, it's mostly reminding yourself that, as I mentioned, no one comes from a purely formative PM position. Everyone has started from ground zero and possibly transitioning from another path. Secondly, you also have to know that there's a mix between knowing what being confident on yourself, like knowing that decisions you're making, like you trust them and you trust your gut and you trust the places that you have been through to make those decisions and to be able to acquire that knowledge. And at the same time, not renouncing to your humility. I think that being humble which so happens to be one of the values that we have at Cabify, is key to like anyone who's, well, generally anyone, but also like, especially when you're doing a transition into a different career path. And I think it's very different to have an imposter syndrome than to have humility in what you do. And I think that being able to identify the difference between those two is key. Sometimes you might think that, you feel out of place and you don't deserve this opportunity. And there's people that know more than you and such. And those are all true, but they're also reachable and you can balance them out. As long as you stay humble and you're realistic and you know when to ask for help and when you just don't have enough knowledge or don't have enough information, and you kind of have to seek it out. But I think the differentiation between those two is important.
How do you feel, Tania, in these low motivation periods? You are mute.
Sorry. Well, it is true, everything what Eva just said. It's difficult to overcome that thought that you are not ready for this job, but in the end, I think it's a matter of motivation and of knowing that everyone needs things to learn. No one's know everything, so just focus on the things you need for doing the job and identify the people you have near that can help you get this knowledge. And take this opportunity for growing. I mean, and also be transparent to everyone. It's not a mistake. It's not a thing to be ashamed. Just saying, I don't know this. I will train that. I will look for the solution. I will search that. It's fine. It's something that everyone should accept and live with that, because it's a thing that happens to everyone. So if you are motivated, you have the people or you have the resources to continue learning, it's just a question of time and for me, motivation.
Interesting. I'll try to take a look on the other side of the coin, and we mentioned like the lack of knowledge on the tech environment. It could be a blocker on the starting of your careers, but I would like to ask you the opposite. Like, this non-tech background, did it help you on something, on moving on your careers? There is any skill that you learn in your first academic or first professional steps that help you then in the technology ecosystem? You want to start, Eva?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's something that I really like, and I always talk about when talking about humanities, like generally any discipline within humanities, and it's that it teaches you how to think critically, how to have critical thinking, right? And kind of like question things all the time. So like as an art historian, you have to, like, in order to determine something's value or to understand its history, you have to like question it all the time and kind of like ask a lot of questions. And that is something that I think is super important to any area of business. But I mean, as a product manager, for instance, and especially if you get into the tech world, not taking things for granted and making sure to question things is super important, right? You're trying to be innovative and to evolve and to drive change. I mean, that's common for any company that is in the tech world. And that kind of, forces you to think outside the box and really criticize things all the time. So that would be one thing that I think is important.
Yeah, from my side, I think that the empathy I had when talking to different users, drivers and riders, and hearing their problems and giving them support, give me the opportunity to use this information and the way I used to talk with them to make people from product or tech to understand what is the impact of the things they are doing, which I think is quite important, because sometimes people just start doing things without knowing actually what for, or if sometimes they are so far from the customer that they don't understand what things could have more impact for them, and not only for your, I don't know, technical challenge, because in the end they are developing things to build a product that solves some problem for a person or for a group of people. So I think that's one of the most valuable things.
So I think we can go for one more topic, and I start receiving many questions from different channels. So I will like you to ask you how you keep yourself like updated. I like to say that machine learning, big data, all these fancy words, and not only fancy words, they are also useful tools for us, and we really use more of them on our products. How you keep yourself like updated, how you know about the environment, are you using, or you read books, you follow any website that you recommend, or how you manage that?
Yeah, so I'll start. So I think that in order to stay relevant, which is like kind of like a given in this tech world, right? Like you kind of have to stay up to date. It's very easy to become obsolete very, very fast. So in order to stay relevant, there's many things you can do. To me, it's not just about reading books, right? Like you can read the Lean Product Handbook or the Agile Manifesto once and then be done with it. But that's not the only thing you can do. And same for, you can listen to a million podcasts. There's articles in Medium. I think that also depends on like what part of the business you're more interested in, or what parts of the discipline you're more drawn to. And all those things really help. But I think to me, the most important thing to kind of like stay relevant is to create a network of people that have similar interests with you professionally. And to kind of like, if you have the chance, create a community, even maybe within your own company. And or kind of like stay in touch with people that are kind of in that scope. So it's true that with COVID, actual events have kind of like been set aside and stuff. But I mean, the people who are attending this event right now, like where there's other formats, there's other channels where you can actually connect. In our case, in Cabify, we have a weekly PM meeting, a weekly PM glue. And there we do talk about things that are more specific to the company itself or the initiatives we're working. But there's also a lot of space where we talk about the discipline itself, the challenges that it creates. We recently, Eloi and I worked recently on redefining the product principles of Cabify. Then we also invite a lot of people from other disciplines to share their knowledge and their expertise, so we can learn from them. So all those things are super important. And when you create those networks of people, you'll see, you can join Slack channels, you can join LinkedIn groups, you can join online events. And in those cases, there's always going to be talks about things that other people are doing, ways and approaches of product that other companies are starting to experiment with. And that is something that just reading books or reading articles is not going to give you. It's kind of like the most important way to stay relevant at a very real life level. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to me. Also, I will add the Twitter tool, because there are many people from different backgrounds and places working in different companies that also share really, really good tips or sources and events. So you can be more accessible maybe with to these people, and just write to them some question and try to see what happens, because sometimes people are just willing to answer and to share the knowledge and to share past situation and see how this is built in other companies and in other groups. So yeah.
Super interesting, girls. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experiences on your product management careers. I think we still have 10 minutes more or less for answer some questions that we are receiving, and Christina is helping us to filtering them. The first one, I really like it, and it's something that I think we should comment. It's kind of a elephant in the room, and I don't have any concrete metric, but it's quite common that we don't see many women in technology, or at least this is the first impression that we get when we think about developers or product management, right? I would like to ask you how you see that, and if it has been an obstacle in your careers.
Well, it's definitely true that I personally have been lucky enough to not experience it in a super aggressive way. I think it's kind of like it happens systemically, like the ways in which women are set aside. It's not only in the tech world, it's kind of like a systemic thing in society. So it's impossible to say you've never experienced it. But it's true that within the tech world, I think there's more and more growing opportunities, and you start seeing women more often. Although there's areas such as like engineering, which commonly have a lack of women there. And I think that has to do a lot with, if you take a step back, the root of it starts with education and starts with like, the formative years. And when you talk about formative years, there's still a very clear and specific split between disciplines that are more men oriented and disciplines that are more women oriented. And that's something that like is embedded in your brain since you're in school. So then you get on to choose careers or studies in college that are very specific to one or the other gender, unfortunately. So I think that's where it starts. And then in the tech world, though, I think it's like a great driver of change in this mindset. And because the possibility of doing career changes here is greater than in other more traditional businesses, the possibility for women to start speaking up and speaking out and having more relevant roles is larger than in other areas, I think. But of course, like you're always going to confront stuff like this, Yeah,
it's also, I think, important to mention that at least what I've seen along this year in Cabify is also that not only the company, but the people working there, in this case, engineers and men mainly, are starting to realize about this problem and also acting to improve the balance we have. For example, here in Cabify, we have an internal group that work for achieve this moment where we have more women in technology, and we did some initiatives to try to improve that. I don't know, for example, going to events, bringing people to the office, and doing some mentorship in some boot camps where only women are participating. So I think it's also important to mention that and to let everyone know that even if it is a sad reality that there are not many women in this world, people are trying to change it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree that I think this starts like just realizing what is the current situation in your company or in your environment in general, and start creating this visibility for the ones that you share there, and being more transparent on it. And this will have this consequence that more people will see in profiles like yours as people that can learn from or can see as a reference in the careers. So happy to have you here. Another question, kind of a little bit related, is there is room, or as Christina mentioned it, there is room for older professionals in such of young industry as the digital area. What do you think? There is discrimination for people that is more older or has more experience in maybe other. It's much harder for them to change that.
Well, I think that ageism is something that definitely is seen in companies around the world. It is true that in terms of like the tech world, because it's such a new kind of environment, it's just more prone to attracting, younger people, because they're at the moment in their lives when making a change is easier, right? Once you have a more established career, a more established personal life and stuff, it is true that making changes becomes a little bit harder. But I don't think it's a matter of like discrimination in terms of, you're not able to make a change if you're older. You're absolutely able. What matters is the mindset that you have. And if you're willing to learn and you're willing to be flexible and open, I mean, your age should not matter at all, because you're still going to start, from ground zero in terms of a career change, the same that I am going to start from ground zero, if I'm in my 30s or in my 20s. So I think that that's really because it's starting from the same basis. It shouldn't be a problem at all. It just so happens that it is true that profiles tend to be a little bit younger, just because of like the nature of, how relatively recent this world is, especially in some countries. If you talk about the States, you probably will see people in older age groups working in the same disciplines, because in the States, the tech world has started, years before it has started in Spain, where it's a little bit more recent.
What do you think about it, Tania?
The same. I mean, it's a matter of motivation and just willing to do this change.
Probably, I mean, and this appears in TV shows and things like this. Like we associate a lot, or I think we tend to associate startups to parties, ping pongs, and all this stuff. And probably for senior people, this is not less attractive, or they feel that they can fit less than in other areas. But I think this just a small part of the digital ecosystem, and there are other companies with different values or cultures that will like a lot to be facing or have this type of profiles, which can also bring, as you mentioned before, like you brought from humanities or language, you brought like different skills. So also people with experience in other areas can bring this knowledge to the company, definitely. Okay. When you take your or you check back your look back to your career, it looks like super obvious that you did these changes to the technical or digital ecosystem. But I guess at some point you feel frustrated, or you feel that maybe this was not the best decision. I guess everything was not perfect during this path, right? How you feel in this situation, how you manage them, or did you thought about quitting at some point?
I think I didn't think about quitting, and I don't think I had that many moments where I felt overwhelming, because all the time I was motivated by learning, not by doing the things the best of the class, but learning and growing. So I cannot remember right now about that specific moment, but of course I had it in the past, that probably they were like very quickly moments. Like just some days I feel, of course, there are too many things, too many new things. I don't know how to do that, or where to start to do this. But the next day or a couple of days, I just did it. I mean, I don't remember that as a very difficult situation for me.
What about you, Eva?
In my case,
you had a typical
I definitely thought about quitting.
You typical conversation with your parents, say, no, we help you in a career, and then you're totally switching from another one.
Yeah, no. I mean, in terms of like being frustrated with, thinking that you don't belong and stuff. It definitely happens. And in my case, I mean, there was moments when it was super overwhelming. And it was just like a lot of work and at points you feel like you're not progressing. Like you're doing a lot of effort and there's no progress at all. But I think that happens in life generally anywhere. So like you manage it the same way you would manage any other situation in your life, right? So like you really have to assess, okay, here are the pros and here are the cons, which one weighs more? And in the end, the challenge of, okay, it's still learning, it's still driving change for me. And it's still like, there's still the possibility to take me to the next point. It was always worth the effort. And then I know I'm being very insistent on this, but being able to rely on people, talk a lot with people that kind of could understand your experience or what you're going through is key there. So like relying on people to me is super important. Like being able to express your thoughts out loud and kind of have a sounding board, at least with someone that you trust or you admire and kind of can take you out of the hole is super important. So yeah, if you have to deal with frustration and such, I think it's a natural thing, and it's important to just accept it and make sure that you're taking, in the end, you're making the best of it for you personally.
Cool. So I think we can close for today. It's been a while since you started. Just one last comment. What will you recommend to the ones that are thinking to move from not technical backgrounds to tech side?
I will say to them that just do it. Like write to people that you know that are in the world, as for example, or anyone through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through your own company if you have identified some roles there, and just start the conversation so you can understand better the role and the movement and the how those people feel when the moment they change, because I think that will make you see that as a more natural thing and easier to do.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Go for it. Make sure to be very mindful when you choose a job, and try to choose companies that are either have that culture, that have that mindset, like, in Cabify, with all this like internal movement that is super promoted and pushed for, or try to start at very small companies where there's the chance of growing is greater. But yeah, try to be mindful. Like, don't go to a super established company where the career paths are super limited and super rigid, because it's just not going to do you any favors. So yeah, that's an important thing.
Totally agree. One more time, thank you so much for sharing me today this talk in BTS, and hope all you like it, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.